G'day, welcome to the Nerdy Dad channel, and the Nerdy Dad review of the 5th and 6th episodes of Moon Knight. I'm also going to do a wrap-up of the Moon Knight series as a whole. I will be talking about these episodes in a spoiler fashion, so that being the case, if you do care about spoilers, go and watch Moon Knight first. Come back, join us later. I'll start by looking at episode 5, which is Asylum, directed by Mohamed Diab. The 4th episode, The Tomb, ended with the rug being pulled out from under us. We went from a tomb raiding adventure in the vein of Indiana Jones or The Mummy, which are movies that I absolutely love, by the way, to being in an asylum. And then the final beat of the episode was a hippo woman, and I really wanted to know what was going on. During the course of episode 5, we did find out what was going on, but it did start confusingly as we flashed between a water-filled cave and a woman. At that point, we had no idea of the significance of either of those things. And then it flashes to the hippo from episode 4, before Mark, Stephen, or was it Jake, find themselves back in Dr. Harrow's psychiatric office. Speaking for myself, I still wasn't sure what was going on at that point. I thought he was dead or dying and the hospital was in his head, but I wasn't sure. I thought we might get some flashbacks during this episode, but I wasn't prepared for what was coming. I like the storytelling and the way the flashbacks are arranged, as Stephen, and begrudgingly Mark, open the doors to their memories. Look, we knew Mark had issues going into that episode, but the guy is messed up. And given what he has been through, no wonder he was messed up. Episode 5 is possibly my favourite episode of the season. And yet, in a lot of ways, I found it difficult to review. It's a character study that, let's face it, has some extreme content, especially for Disney Plus outside of the Stars section. Everything was implied and not shown, which is how they kept it to an M rating. But when you break it down, there's the death of a child, there's child abuse, and there's a character struggling with how to deal with all of that, particularly with the death of his abuser, who was also his mother. Nobody should treat a child like that, but for it to be one of his parents is horrific. This is the origin of our hero. Heroes, if we count Mark and Stephen separately. And it's tragic. We also have the origin of Moon Knight. We heard it in episode 4 after Layla confronts Mark, but we got to see it in the 5th episode, and it's pretty much as it was described, which is also in line with his comic origin. Tick that box, we've seen the origin of the superhero. Look, before we got to all those flashbacks, which form the emotional core of episode 5, we found out that Mark, Stephen, are quite dead. Tararet, who's the hippo-headed goddess of protection and childbirth among other things, confirmed it. The titular asylum is how Mark Stephen perceives their trip to the afterlife. Well, an afterlife, as Tararet explains. In the episode, it's Tararet rather than Anubis who weighs the hearts of Mark and Stephen against the feather of truth. And the hearts not balancing is the incident that sends them back into their memories to find themselves and their value. Trawling back through the memories is not easy. As I said earlier, these are not happy memories. I mean, Mark even created a whole other personality. More than one other personality, but we'll get to that later, to block them out. For Stephen, he also faces the existential threat that he is not real. Look, based on the reason they go back into the memories, it's all for naught, because the hearts still aren't balanced by the time they get to their destination. Mark is totally defeated. He's given up. And it's Stephen who jumps into the fight until he's carried off and then the scales balance. Episode 5 ends with Stephen turned to sand and Mark in the field of reeds, which leads us into the final episode, which is Gods and Monsters, also directed by Mohamed Diab. After the 5th episode, Soul Searching, we find ourselves back with Mark's body, with Harrow searching for Amit's Ushakti, which he finds in short order. This makes his walking stick more powerful, and it turns into more of a staff, maybe an axe. Of course, as well as Harrow and his followers, the other character still in Alexander's tomb is Layla. Look, she's been badass in every episode she's been in, and that hasn't changed here. Quickly, quietly, she takes out one of Harrow's followers to avoid being caught. And then she mourns for Mark, and hides herself among Harrow's followers to finish the mission. We then see what I'm assuming is the other side of the souls that Mark and Stephen saw descending to the Duat in episode 5. When Harrow judges the souls of a group of, I don't know if they're soldiers or police, doesn't matter. What matters is that all of them, except one, are found to be unworthy, and they are sent to the Duat by Harrow. And the empty husks that are their bodies allows Tara to communicate with Layla for the first time, telling her not to attempt to strike at Harrow directly, but to free Khonshu. Notably, this is also the first time that Tara suggests that Layla becomes her avatar. Convenient for the plot, the place that Harrow was taking his followers is the same place where Khonshu's Ushapti is. So everything is coming to head in the one place, the Great Pyramid. Harrow makes short work of the avatars already in the pyramid, which makes it impressive that 2 avatars managed to defeat him later in the episode. Harrow is nothing if not devout. He believes his own doctrine. When challenged over his own scales, he offers himself up until Amit says that he wants him to be her avatar regardless. While Harrow releases Amit, Layla finds and releases Khonshu, who tries to take her as his avatar. She does not trust him, and she refuses. Which brings us back to Mark in the afterlife. An afterlife. He has been granted peace. Peace he doesn't feel he deserves without Stephen. Admitting to himself that he needs Stephen and that Stephen saved him frees both of them. And as Osiris opens up the gate for Mark and Stephen in the Duat, Khonshu is getting his butt handed to him back on Earth. As they pass through the gate, they arrive back in their body with a couple of bullets still lodged in it. But Khonshu also senses them, heals them, and the scene is set for the final showdown with Harrow and Amit. Back in the temple, Osiris's avatar provides Layla with vital information on how to contain Amit. But it has the stinger that they need more avatars, which causes Layla to reach out to Tararet and accept her offer to become her avatar. Temporary avatar. At this point, Harrow and Amit start what is in essence a magical mass murder. A mystical threat, if you will. I'm going to put a pin in that right there until the series wrap up, but I am going to come back to it. We then see Layla emerge as Tararet's avatar. Moon Knight engages with Harrow, and Khonshu returns to battle with Amit. Given the post-credit scene, I'm very much conflicted. In this battle between Khonshu and Amit, I am very much rooting for Khonshu, and I absolutely agree with free will and the ability to make choices, even wrong ones, that people should not be prejudged before they have done the wrong thing. Only, given the way that Khonshu treats his avatars, I find it very difficult to reconcile him as the good guy, as someone who respects free will himself. So, while I'm not sure if he outright lies to Mark and Stephen, it's a real fine line. The heroes win, Amit is bound to Harrow's body, and Khonshu ostensibly releases Mark and Stephen from their commitment. We then get a scene back in the asylum, which confused me until the post-credit scene, but we'll get there shortly. And then Mark and Stephen are back where Stephen started, in Stephen's apartment, chained to the bed. I'm assuming they're chained to the bed because they became aware of the third personality, who they know is a murderer, and they're trying to keep him contained. And then we get to that mid-credit scene. There were plenty of allusions to it, but we now know for certain that there was a third personality, that they saved Jake Lockley for the mid-credit scene. We start in another asylum, a real one this time, where Harrow, Amit, is the patient. I'm assuming the fact that Amit is in Harrow's body is the reason that he can see Khonshu. Look, that scene in the limo is near perfect. It gives me chills. It was so good. And because of the second last scene being a Dr. Harrow scene in the not real assignment, I was momentarily unsure of what was real and not real again. However, seeing Lockley and Khonshu with Harrow in the limo at the end smoothed it out for me. I'm again pretty sure that despite the unreliable narrators through the whole series, that the events happened more or less as they were presented. Okay, now to wrap up this series as a whole. What a wildly different show for Marvel, or any superhero franchise. I'm going to start out with what worked for me. Oscar Isaac and the characters he portrayed. Without a doubt, I absolutely loved Mark, Stephen, and the interplay between these two characters, who just happened to be played by the same actor. Not to mention Jake, who we definitely saw in the post-credits scene, and potentially 2 other times. At the time I'm recording this, I'm not 100% certain, but I think that the Oscar Isaac character talking to Dr. Harrow at the start of episode 5 and at the end of the finale episode was Jake. So, as well as seeing the aftermath and body count of Jake's presence, I think we saw Oscar Isaac play Jake at least 3 times. I love the look of the show. In particular, Mark Spector's Moon Knight, Stephen Grant's Mr. Knight, Khonshu, Tararet, Layla as Tararet's avatar, and all the other mythological and fantasy elements for the show. Look, for the most part, this show looked absolutely awesome. While I love the show, there's a couple of things that I question. The length of the show. Look, the absolute heart of the show was Mark, Stephen, and their relationship. And that rightfully took centre stage, and most of the screen time. And I don't think I'd sacrifice any of that, particularly episode 5. But there are a few things that I wouldn't have minded getting fleshed out a little bit more. And I think the show could have very easily been 7 or 8 episodes long. It's possible if we'd had that longer show, I'd have felt it was too slow. But based on what we got, I don't think so. As the show stands, I think there was plenty of material. And if they fleshed it out a bit more, certain plot points could have been developed and there would have been fewer leaps of logic. Look, there were a number of leaps of logic in the 3rd, 4th, and final episodes that could stand to be smoothed over a little more. Also, Moon Knight feels very separate from the MCU, and that, on the whole, is a good thing. But it is a part of the MCU, which brings me to a question. And it's the type of question that's inevitably going to come up with any type of shared universe, particularly one that sprawls as many properties as the MCU. Look, in Doctor Strange, we are told that sorcerers protect the world from arcane threats. Why then, when there is a mystical being, one of the gods of ancient Egypt, killing dozens, hundreds, or more people in Cairo, don't the sorcerers come to investigate? Surely they're aware of the Egyptian gods. It seems like the type of thing they'd be aware of. Maybe Multiverse of Madness, which I'm seeing in the near future, will provide us with some answers. Or maybe it's just one of the pitfalls of setting what is essentially a standalone series within an established property. Speaking of it being a standalone series, we know that Marvel has submitted it to the Emmys as a limited series, which means we're probably not going to get season 2. Despite my quibbles, I think that Moon Knight is an extraordinary piece of television that I absolutely, thoroughly enjoyed. It was great. This is the Nerdy Dad, signing off. Well, actually, before we sign off, I just want to tell you about what's coming up on the channel. We will be doing reviews for Kenobi. We will be doing reviews for Miss Marvel. And on the movie side, there are reviews for Doctor Strange coming up. And another movie called Interceptor, which was actually produced by my wife's uncle. All right, this is the Nerdy Dad, now signing off.